Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and I want to start by pointing out that Bitcoin fixes this. This is the Bank of England allegedly getting Bitcoin fixes this projected onto it. I did show this to a friend with a keen eye, and they did point out that potentially this might not be real though. And their reasoning was, why is it around the back of here? So I hope this is real. I hope this really happened, but maybe it did, maybe it didn't. If you can confirm or deny, let me know. I'd be interested. Moving on, Bloomberg Intelligence says Bitcoin is showing signs of bottoming and divergent strength. So this is something I've been saying for a little while, and hopefully this continues. I think we're getting close. Got some nice charts to show you in just a moment, and a little bit of bonus stuff at the end. Despite a 72% crash from its all-time high, Bitcoin still has a higher market cap than JP Morgan and Bank of America. Bitcoin is slowly beating the banks. Bitcoin may be entering unstoppable maturation. The fact that Bitcoin didn't exist in October 2007 when WTI, West Texas Intermediate crude oil, rose to its current $84 a barrel for the first time may indicate the appreciation advantage of the nascent technology. The key point of all of this, you can pause the video here and read this if you want to read this. The key point in all of this I just want to make is the fact that the benchmark crypto hasn't dropped along with the latest round of rate hike expectations may also signal a Fed endgame is on the horizon. A top potential catalyst for central banks to curtail tightening is for markets, notably stocks and commodities, to do it for them, which may favour Bitcoin. UK inflation, meanwhile, just hit a 40-year high of 10.1%. Of course, times this number by 2 and you start to get close to the real world number. NFTs are not something I cover often on this channel, but this house here sold as a real world NFT for $175,000 over the weekend, last weekend. The way it works is an LLC, limited liability company, takes ownership of the property. They tokenize the property and mint an NFT that represents ownership of the house, and holding the NFT gives you ownership of the actual house. So scrolling down here, you'll reveal, Bob Lucas pointed out, only the NFT does not represent ownership. The LLC still owns it, and the NFT is a claim with the operating agreement of the LLC. And I noticed that underneath this, apparently over at Balcony DAO, they are already working with the government in the state of New Jersey to try to get around this problem. So we'll see how this works out. Does this mean eventually you'll be able to NFT and tokenize your house? I think so. Is that something I'm personally interested in? Not particularly, but I'd rather see NFTs be used for this sort of thing than JPEGs of rocks or CryptoPunks, and so on and so forth. Speaking of NFTs, Reddit users have created 3 million crypto wallets to scoop up Polygon's NFTs. And I'll get to the Polygon chart a bit later on because it's slowly getting better, quite quietly getting better. And I like to see that from charts when they start to quietly get better. Bitcoin has one last big dip before bullish reversal is consistent. Inflation and stock markets still dictate the pace. I think this is quite funny because the reason I'm pointing this out, T-Analyst has been the sole and the primary source of bullish TA all the way down until we're at where I believe are the lows, and now suddenly he's talking about another last big dip. So I just thought that was kind of funny for his timing. I'm not saying this couldn't happen. I just personally think this is a crowded trade. I think too many people are expecting this to play out, and it reminds me of back here. Lots of people were saying back here, I'll just wait for 5k or 4k and then I'll buy it down there, and it never came. Also back here, I remember being down here and people were saying, I'll just wait for 1k, 1.5k, then I'll buy. This was 3k back here, and it never came. And that's just how, this is the feeling I get at this point. Of course, I could be wrong. Of course, we could dip down. But I don't think anyone should be championing this because this is significant structural damage and is likely not good for the long-term health of Bitcoin. I also found this. I wanted to just, I've pointed this out before, I've mentioned this before, I just wanted to show you this and make sure that we're all on the same page and understanding for this. This is what I would say your normie is expecting. Your normie Bitcoiner, this is, nothing against this person at all, I don't even know who he is, but what do I mean when I say this? I mean that, first of all, they think this is what's coming, okay? This is a standard 4-year cycle repeat, kind of crudely drawn, admittedly, but this is what he's saying, that we're going to tend towards this top 4 years out, and then we're going to go into a bear market. I do not believe this, and I've said this before. I believe that we're going to go left translated. I believe the peak comes early and then we spend 3 years going down instead of 3 years going up and 1 year coming down. That remains to be seen, but if you're not at least having some plan in place for this green scenario, which I think is more likely, I think the red one is just too easy. I think it's just too easy to look back and say, well, that's what it's always done, that's what it's going to do. So Anyway, don't say I didn't warn you. I don't know which one of these is going to happen, to be clear, but my bias is that the green one will take control, and that will be catching a lot of people offside because everyone just thinks this same cycle is going to repeat all over again. And one last point to make here before I move on. If the red does repeat again, if we do just repeat this 4-year cycle all over again, then happy days, because how easy would that be? Okay, if we haven't had this blow off move and entered a bear market pretty soon, within a year, if we continue to do this sort of slowly working our way up to the highs and then blast through them all the way out here into 2024, 2025, then that would be nice and simple to trade. We will have seen this 3 times over before, so a 4th time, nice and easy, right? Here are 3 potential scenarios which I think summarize everyone's ideas. So I think the most popular idea is this number 3, where we're going to drop 50% and then go. We could, of course, just trade sideways and then come out of here. I don't believe these 2 are likely. Of course, anything can happen, but I am currently championing scenario 1. I think we're going to drop into a cycle low and then go pretty pronto. That remains to be seen, but we'll certainly find out in just a few weeks. Meanwhile, Coinbase has filed an amicus brief against the SEC to support Grayscale's spot Bitcoin ETF. I have to be honest, I did not know what an amicus brief was, so I've googled it, and it turns out amicus brief, or an amicus curiae, is an individual or organization that is not a party to the legal case, but who is permitted to assist the court in offering information, expertise, and insight that has a bearing on the issues of the case. So essentially, Coinbase are going to be an expert witness. They are going to show up and hopefully fight the corner of Grayscale as an industry-leading expert. And hopefully we can finally see this spot Bitcoin ETF approval. Spot, of course, being Bitcoin settled instead of futures, which are cash settled. As I said last time around, if you've been in the space a while, then once bitten, twice shy. We have seen this over and over and over and over again. They hype up having an ETF, a spot ETF. Finally, it should be approved, and then it doesn't. So I'll believe it when I see it. I'm sure one day we'll get one. Bitcoin is flooding from exchanges, and could this be a sign of a bear market bottom? I think over the past year or 2, this indicator has ceased to be very useful. I guess typically when people withdraw large amounts of Bitcoin from exchanges, because they're putting it into cold storage with no intention of selling it, and then the converse is true. When people move Bitcoin onto exchanges, you would typically expect them to do so for the purpose of selling. But there have been plenty of times where we've seen these metrics go up and down, and the price has not done what you'd think. So hopefully this is a bullish sign. I don't personally put too much weight on it, but I know a lot of people do. It's been a while since I talked about a Fed pause and pivot. Kind of looking like I'm going to be wrong. We have about 10, 11 days left of the month, so there is still time. Perhaps it comes in November. I'll take it if it comes in November, but of course, being wrong and being late are the exact same thing in trading. So I did say September, October. It's October, no sign of a pause yet, but I'm not the only one that thinks we're getting close. Like I said, if it shows up in November, I'll take it, because that means risk is going to come on strongly right around the time that we're expecting to see these cycle lows form. So will the Fed pause and pivot? I think so. That remains to be seen. Let's keep going. The Zillow index is showing that shelter inflation is coming down rapidly. It's a lagging indicator, but it's coming down rapidly. Deflation is the risk here, not inflation. And so does this mean that we can expect to see CPI come off quite quickly? And if it does that mean we can expect the Fed to pause after their last 75 basis point hike? Quite possibly. This tech put call ratio moving average is now at the highest level ever seen. Massive unwinding is not far away. The long US dollar is the most crowded trade by far, according to Bank of America's global fund manager. And we're seeing this when the indicator goes below minus 3.3. The stage is set for a massive fall in the Dixie. And that's exactly what we've got. We've got a very crowded trade. A lot of people thinking that the stock market's only going to go down. A lot of people thinking that Bitcoin's got to drop another 50%. That remains to be seen. It could certainly happen, but the technicals are starting to tell us that perhaps we should be open to upside, and we are coming into focus to see this cycle low, which we'll get to in just a moment. Meanwhile, if you're wondering, if you're asking yourself, where is this buying going to come from in equity markets? Well, they're extremely close to triggering a $200 billion in CTA positioning. Markets also roughly 7 days from the blackout window closing, and corporate buybacks returning at $5 billion a day for November and December. And what do we know happens in November? The start of a new cycle for equities and the cycle low and at the end of the first week for Bitcoin. Continuing this theme, I pointed this out before as well, big tech earnings. Look, 25th and the 27th, right around the time we'd expect to see a cycle low for the equity markets. And I did say, remember, show me the charts and I'll tell you the news. I said the charts are telling us to expect surprising upside. I also said I had no idea what these companies were going to produce in terms of results. I said I didn't follow them, but show me the charts and I'll tell you the news. And the charts were telling us to be open to seeing upside surprises from these companies right around the time of the cycle low. And furthermore, we're seeing Netflix investors celebrating down below like this. And why? Because the company has smashed all earnings expectations and added 2.4 million subscribers versus 1 million expected. The company expects to add 4.5 million subscribers next quarter. So the stars are aligning. I wonder if this is going to be a case of show me the charts and I'll tell you the news. The charts are telling us that the news is going to be better than expected and that this is going to be the people that are on the right side of the trade, myself included, I believe. It's Bitcoin or slavery. At the end of the day, it will be Bitcoin free banking or it will be CBDCs, slavery. And with all that said, let's get into the charts. Here's the dollar. Is this dollar going to roll over? Are we going to continue to see? So far, I made this point a couple of times. We get this chop into the end of the month, then we test this line and maybe break down. So far this is playing out. It's playing out quite nicely. Do we test and bounce or do we test and break down? That remains to be seen. I actually have no idea, of course. How could I know? But I like to see this. This is sort of behaving how we'd expect it to. Let's go through the charts and take a look, because again, people remember, I've said this as well, I've done this several times on the channel. I grabbed this fractal here and I said I wouldn't be surprised if we did something like this out of here. So maybe a little bit more time needs to elapse. A drop into this cycle low. It certainly seems like we're not far off this sort of pattern repeating again. We have not broken down convincingly. A lot of chop around this area, but one thing we know is the cycle low is due. That reminds me, I said I would cover the cycle lows and explain how I use these and how they work a little bit better, because I always talk about them but I never really explain them. So let's explain them. Let me show you a brief overview of how I use these and how I believe they provide true alpha. Okay, so I've jotted down for you so you can see. Gold obeys these cycles on average 24 to 28 days, okay? And then within that, if you go to a weekly chart, you'll find that it makes major lows between 22 and 26 weeks. The S&P will make daily cycles every 38 to 44 days on average, and over on the weekly chart will form major lows every 26 weeks. Bitcoin will form 60-day cycle lows plus or minus 10%, of course, so 54 to 66 days for Bitcoin's daily cycles, and over on a weekly chart you'll find it forms major lows, major swing lows, 38 to 47 weeks on average. Okay, so armed with this knowledge, if we go over to the S&P, what you'll find, and if you don't know about this as well, hold shift and click and you can measure. So what you'll find is all of these major lows fall within this sort of window of 38 to 44 days. Now it's important to point out that this is not an exact science, okay? This is not something that you can just say, okay, day 40 I'm going to buy, okay? That's caveat number one. You mustn't do that. You must always wait for a swing low. So something like this, where when we got into this timing band here, so we knew that this was the cycle low here, this swing, 43 days right in the window. We were expecting this cycle low. I'm pretty sure I did this live on the channel as well. And when we got down here, we don't just buy because that's day 43 or 42 or 40, whatever the number is. We don't do that. We wait to see confirmation. Once we have this swing in play or potentially a trend line break, then we can say, okay, with confidence, that is most probably the cycle low. So then we mark one of these arrows for this cycle back here, and then we can count forward from this day and know that somewhere around here, somewhere around 38 to 40 days, we can expect to see a major swing, and indeed that is what we got. Again, we wouldn't be buying here without seeing confirmation, but having seen this big bullish green candle first, then we can be confident that we're going to start to move off. And this is how I arrive at the conclusion that we are due a cycle low down here around 38. So a couple of other nuggets of information for this. The more severe the decline, the earlier the cycle low is likely to be forced. Okay, so there's a chance that this could be the cycle low and that we've already kind of missed it. Okay, there's a chance that this could be here. Now 27 would be very, very early, but given the amount of decline we've had, it's always possible. I think we are still much more likely to see a day 38 to 40 cycle low, which is why I'm continuing to play patient. A certain amount of this, you just have to learn to trust the cycles. Okay, and that's not to say that we just buy willy-nilly, because if we get here, if we get out a few more days and we're just bleeding and bleeding and bleeding, then you don't want to go trying to catch a falling knife. So this is where I look for either a swing low pattern, something like this, okay, or a trend line break, which is why I have my trend lines here. So if we can get a swing low form and a nice pattern like this, then I can put confidence in that because we have a well-defined stop. Okay, you know, it would look like this, right? But if we don't get that sort of pattern, then I go to a trend line break, because for me, confirmation and confidence that the move and the trend is shifting is more important than trying to get the low. I would rather have a wider stop and a smaller position than just be stabbing in the dark trying to catch the absolute pico bottom. Okay, for me, that's not how I roll. So anyway, that's how the cycles work. I know that we're due a cycle low in the equities around here. I've been talking about this over and over and over again. When we eventually get some sort of price action, like I've been expecting this to sort of repeat again, as I've been saying over and over again. Let's say we get this, something like this. Then when we get down here, I'll be starting to think, okay, we're in the right sort of timing window. Enough time has elapsed for a reversal. And then we'll be looking for, do we get a swing low? Do we get a trend line break? Does the long come from up here? Does the long come from a swing low pattern? Who knows, right? In fact, if I grab this fractal again, if I grab it from here and use some of the upside rally, you'll kind of see what I mean. So if we get this sort of thing play out, a drop down into this cycle low, and then we start to form a swing low pattern, then of course that's where the long comes from, right? We put the long here with a stop maybe below this, and we target the top of the wedge or beyond. That's how the cycle lows work. If we go over to Bitcoin, just to illustrate this a little bit further. So I've marked these cycle lows here for Bitcoin. You can see if we grab this major low and drop here, then 62, pretty perfect for Bitcoin. What was this? 56, also perfect for Bitcoin. So walking forward 60 days, this is where the green line is. So we know that another one of these major swings is going to come. Again, it could come early, it can come late. Around 80% of the time, the markets will obey their normal timing windows. So you have to be open that 20% of the time you get a very early or a very late cycle. But I know that we're due at this cycle low here, so any sort of move up and then a drop into that cycle low would tell me that that's the sort of time to be looking for a reversal, and that's a good time to start looking for a swing low or a trend line break. If you're wondering about price, where does price come in? The answer is it doesn't. Okay, this is a timing band window. This is not predictive of price, it's not indicative of price. This cycle low for both Bitcoin and the equities, we could have a move up and form a higher low. We could have a chop around into a slight drop, meaning an equal low. We could bounce off the low at the bottom, or we could take out this low and form below this low. Okay, it really does not speak to price. The absolute same is true of the S&P. So this cycle low, we could rally up and drop into it. We could chop sideways into it. We could just bleed straight down into it. There's no way of knowing. This does not predict price. This is a timing window. And this is the exact reason that I like to combine this with a trend line break or a swing low pattern. So I use my technical analysis to get me in, but I also use the cycle count just to be mindful of where we are in the cycles. And the two of those together, I believe, gives me a strong alpha over the market. Jumping into gold, you can see the same thing. So when we rallied up and formed a cycle, then I knew that there's plenty of time here, isn't there? There's plenty of time, 22 to 28 days, plenty of time to continue lower, especially when we got rejection. So the combination of rejection and resistance, knowing that we had a failed cycle from back here where we had taken out this cycle low in this range here, this all in combination with the standard trend lines and technical breakdowns tells me that we can confidently hold a short for at least another week or two before we can start to entertain looking for a swing low reversal pattern and closing the short. So I hope that explains it. If it doesn't, throw it down in the comments if you got any questions on that. I'll try to be a bit more mindful and continue to explain this sort of thing as we go along. It's the kind of thing that it's not a very complex thing, but it takes a lot of touch. It takes a lot of experience to learn to trust the cycles, to learn what to look for. There's a lot of caveats in trading. There's a lot of people believe in having this sort of airtight system full of indicators and all of that. As you can see, I'm not one of these people. I draw a line and I use the cycles, and the rest comes from experience. And it's something that you can only learn from doing loads and loads and loads of repetitions. So it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it works for me. NASDAQ, again, the cycle low in the S&P tells me to just be a bit more patient. We've not jumped in, we've not tried to predict anything, we're just letting the trend lines tell us when the market has shifted, and right now it hasn't shifted. We're still below the trend line, so I'm still playing patient. The Dow, slightly different story. The Dow's broken out. Is the Dow leading? Are we going to get a retest? I would think quite possibly we are. we can see that patience has been rewarded for the UKX. So I think it's almost time to move this trend line over. We're just looking for a little bit more basing. It's not clear, is it? This is still in a downtrend, so we don't want to be longing just yet. But I think this is going to show us some strength soon and a reversal pattern. Coinbase, MicroStrategy, Riot, Marathon, you know the score. Look how close we're getting to this green line now. So a little bit more chop, drop into this cycle low. I'm going to start to scale in. We'll get out of October, and in November I'll let you know. So make sure you're subscribed if you want to see that. Tesla and Apple. Tesla, you can see, look, right into resistance. Earnings are out. Look, Tesla, surprise, not too bad. Some of it revenue below, but earnings above. So show me the charts and I'll tell you the news, right? I've said this over and over again. Apple, right into resistance, waiting on earnings. So we'll see how this goes, but everything is kind of aligning to me. Everything looks like we're about to break out. So a little bit more patience is going to be rewarded. Oil, potential long up to 100 here with a stop just below. Not just yet. Wait till we get back above this horizontal, and then perhaps that could be a trade. I'm still hoping that we can get a push up to the high 90s or 100s, and then from there I'll be looking at this big short. So that scenario is still half in play, although it's looking a bit weak at the moment. You could alternatively, as a trade idea, take a trend line break out to the long side of that, but I'm personally not interested in that because the risk reward isn't great. Gold, kind of already shown you, holding this short, continue to hold this short until we get some sign of a cycle low, but it's a bit too early to entertain that at the moment. Ethereum, again, if it breaks out of here, that would be very bullish, and bullish looking at least, but we know with the cycle low for Bitcoin that we're due this drop down, so from my perspective, better to be mindful of this timing window and keep an eye on that. XRP, what is this? Kind of reminds me of a distribution sideways pattern. Maybe it's consolidation before a move higher. Really needs to get going sooner rather than later, in my opinion, but that's okay. Long and strong, continue to push. I did say we'd cover MATIC. MATIC is slowly getting better, isn't it? It's considerably off its lows from this point. Yeah, 165%. So maybe there's a trade coming out of MATIC in the not too distant future. Has it arguably broken out here, coming in for that retest? Maybe we can line a long up for MATIC. So put this here with a question mark perhaps. Maybe this is a trade. Let's see if we can get a resumption off of this trend line. So not at the moment, but we'll cover Zcash as well. Zcash, I don't really have much to say about Zcash other than probably going to continue to go sideways until Bitcoin finds its low, and then potentially we can long Zcash too. Dollar, I think I've already shown, rolling over, and the chart of truth making its way up to 4.5% as expected, pricing in that 75 basis point hike from the Fed. That remains to be seen. I'll continue to monitor this. All eyes on the Fed. If you found value here today, I'd appreciate it if you could drop a like on the channel, subscribe if you're not already. Go ahead and turn the notifications on if you want to see how I deal with these market cycles and technicals, and how I put my trades on over the next couple of weeks. And in the meantime, look after yourselves. Take care. All the best from me. Cheers. Bye.